The title of this morning's discussion is Driver's Seat. Now, start off with a quick story. Not yesterday, but the Saturday before that, had to run a few errands, um, went grocery shopping, did a few other things, and swung by the house to drop off the groceries and all that. And typically, when my wife and I drive together to whatever we're doing, whether it's date night or grocery shopping or what have you, usually a brief conversation we have is all right, who's driving, which vehicle are we taking? Are we going in my wife's um, SUV and she's driving, or are we going to go in my pickup truck and I'm driving? And we kind of base it upon what's going on. And it's like, well, you drove last night, I'll drive this morning, so on and so forth. And we go back and forth, and and one of us drives and we take that person's vehicle. So there we were. We're in the pulling into the driveway, or at some point we're kind of talking, and we said, all right, and we had to run out to Walmart to get a couple little incidentals, some things that the grocery store didn't have, and so we are going to run over to Walmart and pick up a few items. And like I said, we unloaded and everything else, and we said, well, who's driving? I said to my wife, I said, so are uh, are we taking your car and you're driving, or are we taking my truck and I'm driving? And she goes, how about if we take your truck but I drive? Bum bum bum. I know some of the guys are looking at me like, oh man. And so I just kind of chuckled, and she said, no, I'm serious. So I was kind of like, okay. And then when we were heading out the door, there she goes off to my truck, and I'm waiting to see, all right, are we for real? Is this happening? And she's like walking right towards the driver's side on my truck, which then, of course, came the great dilemma. What do I love more, my truck or my wife? And all the ladies are kind of looking at me like, all right, Pastor, what'd you do? She drove. And while we're driving, at one point, because my wife also likes to, when going to different places, likes to take back roads. And so there I am sitting in the passenger seat of my truck with my wife driving. And this was the first time I've sat in the passenger seat of my truck, I think, out on the open road. I've let my daughter back it up in the driveway, and I've taken my kids to parking lots and let them drive around. So I've sat in the passenger seat, but this was my first time out on the road in the passenger seat in my truck for the first time since I drove it off the lot when I bought it a few years ago. And at one point, my wife said, relax. And and the thing is, and to give credit where credit's due, my wife is actually a very good driver. Okay, my truck was in good hands. But as I was sitting there in the passenger seat, I thought to myself, and I chuckled and thought, there's a sermon in here someplace, which kind of led me to where we are here. Because the two things that had to, and I'm kind of having fun with this story. This, I mean, trust, it was not a traumatic experience. Please don't misread. I'm just kind of yucking it up a little bit, this whole thing, because to me there was a comicalness to it. Um, But it did get me to think a little bit about two things that I had to solidify in my mind and heart before my wife jumped behind the wheel of my truck and drove us to Walmart was two things. Where was my priority? What was more important to me? My wife or my truck? That was the first thing. The obvious answer is my wife. When her and I made vows, the day we were married, that was a lifetime commitment. The truck, when I signed on the dotted line and bought it, that was a thing that I purchased for a specific use. My relationship with my wife far outweighs a four-wheeled thing. Second thing was, as we were on the back roads, and my wife's a good driver. I mean, I know she's a good driver. But she still had to say to me, relax, which then draws the question, where's my trust? Do I really, truly trust her with everything? And I thought about, how does that relate to our relationship with God? And so the two questions that I want us to ask ourselves this morning, and I'm just going to encourage everyone to reflect on, is number one, is God truly the most important thing in your life? Is there anything in competition with that? And number two, how much do you trust God? Do you trust God enough to get in the passenger seat of your life and let Him drive? And I think those are two separate things for us to grapple with, because it's very easy to say, oh, I absolutely love God, but do you also trust Him? Because I easily could have made the argument with the situation with my wife and said, oh, I absolutely love my wife more than I do my truck, but I just don't trust her. It creates quite the conundrum. And I think it's a conundrum that very often we as believers sometimes struggle with in our spiritual walk. Because it's very easy for us to say, oh, I love God. God's the absolute most important thing to me in all the world. But on top of that, do you 100% trust God that you will hand over the keys to your life and let Him drive? And not just let God drive, but sit back and relax. And so I was led to 1 John chapter 2, and just only going to deal with verse 15 through 17. So it's a pretty short reading. Starting at verse 15. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So when we think about what does that mean in our lives, what is that application? You know, we throw around the word love quite often. Anyone who knows me, if they were talking about me, they'd say, yeah, Pastor James, he loves his coffee. But is that the kind of love we're talking about here? No. I love coffee. I love Chinese delivery on movie night, sitting on the sofa, chilling. But that's not the kind of love we're talking about. We're talking about the kind of love more along the lines of what do you live for kind of love. Where's your priority? You see, the problem with loving in the sense that we're talking, that spiritual love, that thing that fulfills you, is that anything of this world is just that. It's a thing. It's a thing. And all things are replaceable. Bottom line. Now, can we have emotional attachment to things? Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with emotional attachment to things. I think that's very normal. And that's part of the human experience. Things remind us of events. Things can have special meaning if a particular person gave it to us. Things can represent different ideas and etc. And there's nothing wrong with having an emotional attachment to a thing, but having that love of that thing with the expectation that it will fulfill you will always fall short. Because now, do I plan on driving my truck till the day that the wheels fall off? Absolutely. But my other plan is that my relationship with my wife is going to last a lot longer than that truck. Things are temporary and are replaceable. But yet, so often we treat them as if they're not. It's very easy for us to get wrapped up in those things and to have what could be either just using it as a tool, as a very practical matter, to maybe having some emotional attachment to it because of whatever event in your life, to being passionately loving it. It's of this world. And the kind of love we're talking about here is beyond that, is more important than that. Verse 16, for all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. Now, few things about that, and I was thinking about that, and again, all the things of the flesh, all the things of this world are temporary. And they never and what they give us in return is temporary. So if you've ever known anyone who is really into electronics, and this is not, I'm not being critical of people who are really into electronics and that's their jam. You know what? Good for you. Next time I'm struggling with my phone with a feature, you can help me out, okay? But you think about the individual who, when the newest, whatever phone they have, when the newest model comes out, individuals who are up until 12 o'clock at night, sitting at their computer, hitting that order button, like as soon as it turns midnight, so they can be the first one to get that particular device. God love you. That's not me. I'll get last year's version at a discount. But those people who need that newest thing, and they get it, and it's awesome, and it has all the bells and whistles, and they learn how to navigate it and all these neat features and everything else, means a lot to them. That's great. Good on them. But what happens when that all of a suddenly becomes passé, when that is no longer the cutting edge? Because the because right after that's released, what does the company do that manufactured that phone? They start talking about the next model coming out the following year. And what do you got? You got this person who's just always chasing the latest and greatest, trying to fulfill something. Now, again, I'm not knocking people who are really into that. Like I said, if that's your jam and that's something that you're really into, that's fine, as long as it's still done in a healthy way, as long as you're not obsessive about it. But the thing is no matter what you get in terms of anything physical, whatever fulfillment it gives you, whatever it gives you emotionally, whatever it does for you, what it does for you is just as temporary as the thing itself. It's not permanent. If you're using it to fulfill you. If you're just using it to fulfill a need, like to get from point A to point B, as long as they put the key in and turn and it starts, that's fine. It'll satisfy that need. But I'm talking about our deep emotional and spiritual needs. It's temporary. And that's why I believe, and this is just my opinion, some people are always never satisfied in life and always chasing after something. And then when they get it, it's not enough. And they got to chase after the next thing. Things of this world are not a replacement for God. Now, another way to put it into perspective, and when I was reflecting upon this in terms of the world versus God, it's not so much the world versus God. God is the creator of the world. But if we're chasing after things of the world, we're chasing after things that were created and not chasing after the creator. The created is always less than the creator. There's a reason why, whether it's humans birthing children or animals, etc., the child is never equal to the parent, because that which is created is never equal to the creator. It was by design that God did that. Whatever God creates is never equal to him. So why do we chase after that which is less than God when God is accessible through Jesus Christ? The one other thing about the world and why we draw that delineation between worldly things and spiritual things is because ever since the fall, all that which is flesh is corruptible. God is not. Period. Verse 17. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. See, here's the amazing thing about, and again, I always talk about our spiritual journey. Our life here on earth is temporary. We came into this world, and eventually we will leave this world. During that time, hopefully we'll make a bit of a difference. And most importantly, we'll learn who God is and who we are in Him. But the thing is about our spiritual journey is our spiritual journey starts here on this world, but it doesn't end here, does it? Our physical life here on earth comes to an end. But our spiritual journey does not. And so, where is our priority? Is our priority in the temporary? Or is our priority in the eternal? And when we are able to truly love God and allow the love of God in us, I believe it is then that all things are put into proper perspective. That we recognize the temporary has its place, but it's temporary. And our true love needs to be that which is eternal. And so, again, I'm going to circle back to my silly story at the beginning. And by the way, this really happened with the whole truck thing. Like I said, and I also want to make it clear, this was having my wife drive my truck. This was not something that I struggled with, okay? But it is something that struck me kind of funny. Because it was an example to me that, or I shouldn't say example, a reminder to me that my truck, it's a temporary thing. It's a nice thing. I in the proper use or context, I love my truck. It's a great vehicle. You know what? It suits its purpose. I enjoy driving it, etc. It's great. But it's temporary. In the end, it's just a truck. It's just a thing. It is replaceable. My relationship with my wife is not. And so I had to ask the question, what's more important to me, my truck or my wife? Obviously, my wife. And then once in the truck in the passenger seat, had to ask the question, do I 100% trust my wife? Well, I'm sharing the story with you, so obviously I do, and everything turned out fine. But for the bigger picture, what is most important for you in your life? Where does God fit into that? Is there anything in your life? And here's the thing, and I don't mean this on like a um, skim the surface question, okay? This is not a skim the surface question. Is there anything in your life more important than God? The obvious answer is, oh no, God's most important. You know, that's the obvious answer, okay? My friends, I'm asking you and encouraging you, dig deeper. Really look in your heart. Is there anything that is in competition with God in your life? Is there anything that you love more than God? And I'm asking that question not in a wagging my finger, how dare you? I'm asking that question in a sincere, earnest, please double check. because it's very easy for us to get distracted in life and get distracted by the pickup trucks, the fast cars, the fancy house, the electronic devices, and all these things. There's a lot of stuff in this world that can distract us and become a greater priority. Our work, our careers, our even the things we worry about. There's some people, there's some people, let's be honest, who are addicted to worrying. There's some people who worry that they don't have enough to worry about, okay? Or they stress about because they don't have enough stress. I'm asking and encouraging all of us, myself included, dig deep, search our hearts, really make sure that God is the love of our life. Second, do you 100% trust God? Are you right now willing to say to God, Lord, I put you in the driver's seat in every aspect of my life. And I want to paint one last picture for you, and I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to stick with the driving thing. I want you to picture your life. I want you to picture all the different aspects of your life. Your family, your job, your health, finances, this, that, I don't care what it is, everything, just every single aspect of your car, of your life. And I want you to assign a car to it. Maybe it's a little Volkswagen. Maybe it's a fancy pickup truck. Maybe a Rolls Royce. Different aspects of your life. Because let's be honest, certain aspects of our lives are far more important than others. I have several aspects of my life that if I associated it with a car, trust me, it's a clunker. And I could care less what happens to it. And that's easy to give the keys to that over, isn't it? I don't care if you scratch it up and bang it up, whatever. Are you willing, if you did that, if you took your entire life and assigned cars, different quality cars based upon the importance of it, are you comfortable handing over every single set of keys to every single one of those cars to God and say, drive any one you want? Because not only do I love you, I trust you. My friends, in all aspects of our lives, let's put God in the driver's seat. Amen.